Welcome to Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me Adam Percipio. Adam,
All right.
good to have you on again.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. And today we're going to be talking about mirror magic.
Yeah, mirror
And this
magic.
is a subject that has not been touched uh, on the channel yet. But Adam, go ahead and tell me how you got into mirror magic.
Well, it came when I was studying the goddess Nyx, or I was really working with the primordial waters, working with invocations and path workings with the river Styx, and in doing so, I ended up in a place where I was projecting my consciousness not quite into the other world, but
Right.
like the nether realm, like the
Yeah.
gray place, the place of in betweens. And
Yeah.
I met a teacher there that taught me how to get in contact with my shadow. And then once I get in contact with my shadow, then I was able to use the mirrors more effectively because I had to make a contract with my own shadow or the dark psychology of source.
Okay. Now, uh, just to touch on a few subjects on mirrors. You know, the Roman god of fire created a mirror to see past, present, and future. The Aztecs would use obsidian for their mirrors,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's
So that
a
gets into the dark scrying mirrors. Also, somebody that's a little bit more famous, I'm sure your viewers would appreciate. Nostradamus also used the mirror as part of his techniques of scrying.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay,
yeah, it was used in ancient Egypt, the reflection, because the thing is that with the just like my last name, Percipio, which is Latin for perspective, the perspective of what you're looking at isn't actually reality. See, you yourself as an individual, you are yourself, but an image of you is a slight variation of said, yourself. It's not necessarily you that you're looking at.
okay. Now, what would you say are some mistakes that people make when using a magic mirror or construct?
When what?
What mistakes people make when constructing or using a magic mirror.
Well, the first mistake is that not knowing yourself. Like I said, in my process, I met with the king of the nether realm and I made a contract with him so that I would forever give as much as I take from my mirror. So this also dives into shadowmancy. See, I could cast my shadow or I could use my shadows to sometimes peer into other places in the world or other worlds. And so just in concept and in theory, what essentially this art would be is a tool more like a vehicle instead of like a camera. It's not so much like you're looking through, like you are there. So I know in some of my trips when I was performing Mirrormancy, I had this also deeply ties into alchemy, the alchemist mirror. But I remember this one trip extensively because I was around Samhain a lot of years ago, and I projected myself all the way down to the depths of Tartarus because I wanted to meet Kronos. Now, I did so using a full-bodied mirror and in a completely dark room. And when I stepped into the mirror, I was in a very, very deep place of physical darkness. Now, you hear a lot of adepts as well as occultists talk about traversing the abyss. Well, with Mirrormancy, you could actually end up there. So there I met, spider entities and various other demonic demons from Asian cultures. And it was that's for one, that's very dangerous, especially because when you are working with Mirrormancy, you are essentially becoming in contact with it might physically look like you, but it might not be you. So then once you're aware of it, it's aware of you. And it's not one of those things, it's not like an invocation where you can blow out the candles and skew the circle and then it's done. There's reflections everywhere.
Mm,
So I mean, Stranger Things comes to mind sometimes when I'm talking about things like this.
yeah. Okay. Now, uh, do you ever use this technique to, let's say, go to the underworld and negotiate with deities down there?
Yeah, for sure. I use it a lot in my invocations. Yeah. Also, times what I'll use it for is like let's say I just got I'm done with the working with the Garis, number 2 in the Ars Goetia. I'll put him in a mirror, and then I will put myself into a hypnotic suggestive trance where then I can then with my open eyes see his realm, his circle, and the lessons that are derived of such. So this is kind of like a combination or a love child of invocation and summoning because you're
Mm.
doing both, but neither. It's a cross between the two. And it also makes the magic more corporeal, you see, because you're essentially using a mirror. All it does is reflect light, right?
Mm.
So you're essentially using it almost like a light bridge. You are physically entering or conjuring said things. It's the easiest way to open portals, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because essentially what you're doing is you're working with celestial forces. So it's a temporal casting. I mean, you're messing with forces that are equivalent to that of physics and gravity at that point.
Mm. Okay.
So it is primordial in nature.
Now, I know that a lot of people tend to, use other items with a reflective surface to reflect negativity. Like, take, for instance, sometimes around Yule time, some people will take a Yule tree ornament and then fill it up with herbs and stones of protection, and then they'll just go ahead and hang it over the windows and doors to reflect back any negativity that's sent to them. Do you do anything similar to that?
No. In fact, a lot of the times we can get into how I defend myself,
Okay.
and also how I use the mirror. But a lot of times, like let's say somebody is cursing me, or
Right.
somebody has hurt me, or done some kind of work against me. I have a completely different technique to most people. In fact, I investigate exactly what entity they used. Then I try to talk to the entity and see what methods they use, and then I try to negotiate with the entity rather than making it a fight. I make it a conversation. So there aren't a lot of entities that I haven't worked with that are. There's not too many uncommon to me. So I have either knowledge of or a relationship with the majority of anything anybody can send to me. So I use the mirrors, like for instance, like if anybody ever uses the Goetia against me, these spirits then come to me and they're like, hey, there's this. So then I'll cast the same spirit or something similar to then invocate, summon, and then commune with it. I use it instead of so much as a reflecting against negativity, more of like an absorption, thus
Okay.
taking the curse into a part of my being and fortifying me, like a
Okay.
steroid shot.
Interesting.
So I think
Uh,
that's where the alchemy would really come into play. Instead of taking it and redirecting it, now that I have this extra energy, right? If somebody gives you something negative, somebody gives you hate, well, that's energy that you didn't have. So why waste it? Why not utilize
okay. I see what you're saying. Um, a lot of people tend to use mirrors to look at past lives or answer questions or maybe see ghosts. Do you use it, say, for any of those?
it? Definitely for ghosts. Not so much with past lives. I just do the traditional methods with that. Like, I just meditate. I just sit there and I just meditate. I don't like to use mirrors for that because, unfortunately, I cannot say that the majority of the conjurings that I do with mirrors are not like baseline negative. They start aggressive, they start dark, they start negative. I've never I mean, even some of the divine goddesses that I work with through a mirror, it is a harsher perspective. So, um, I mean, think about, I mean, if I was going to like try to use that as a past life, I probably would only see the negative aspects of it.
I see.
Right. Plus, I don't really believe in like focusing too much on that, but definitely when it comes to ghosts or things like that, mirrors are definitely important. Like another good tip, put some rosemary in your pockets. I know this sounds crazy. Just put some rosemary in your pockets when you're talking to a mirror. And then you can do an invocation with the river Styx with the shower. You got one in your bathroom. You don't need a black mirror. Okay, then bathe in the river Styx and speak into the mirror, and then see a form of yourself. This is how I refine myself alchemically. If you're injured, a lot of times what I'll do if I'm injured or hurt somewhere, physically, spiritually, emotionally, I'll conjure my reflection on the mirror, kind of like Dorian Gray, and give it to my reflection so that
Mm,
he is the one suffering, not me.
okay. Now, some other things that I want to mention is that I had spoken on the Aztecs using obsidian. There was an Aztec god by the name of Tezcatlipoca who would use his name actually means smoking mirror. He wore a black mirror as a chest plate so others would communicate with him. Um, do you ever take into consideration any kind of lore for trying new things or kind of you know in increasing your abilities?
Yeah, for sure. I thought that was the basis of all neo-paganism and occultism. It's essentially taking the anthropological evidence as
Yeah.
well as the myth and then applying it to said method to try to reproduce a result. So I like to use things like I believe there's a god of shadows, which is kind of funny. He's named Arum, like
Yeah.
or Adam, is the
Right.
god of darkness in Mesopotamian literature. So that's interesting. Then you have Narcissus or an Echo. You have that. You have which in my opinion, that story is like really misconstrued. There's a very powerful message in it, but I think it's that if you look at it, he drowned and then went directly into the river Styx into the afterlife, and Narcissus drowned when Cupid's arrow hit him wrong, right? So once you get past the vanity of the mirror, then you could actually use it to, like, for instance, I use mirrormancy like that. I see because narcissism and narcissism is typically it's a bad trait. It's a bad thing. So I look in the mirror when I'm doing these meditations. What attributes in my life do I need to change about myself? Because I'm physically seeing somebody that isn't necessarily me. There's a darker, evil, or more aggressive, more hate-filled being. So I recognize this part in the mirror, the dark psychology of it, and I use it for shadow work so that I can reform that in my life. So
Okay.
that's another way that it could be used. I like to think that it also could be like that of a two-way mirror. I contact my ancestors through the mirrors as well.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Now, I know that some people, one mistake some people make is to on the picture frame. Some people will use a plastic picture frame instead of, let's say, wood. Using wood is good because wood is a good conductor of energy. Um,
Yeah. It goes more to that. It also has to do with the quality of your mirror. Most mirrors that people use these days, like you get from Walmart or Target, it's just a plastic reflective surface on a piece of plastic. It's not glass.
yeah, make sure
Like the
it's
kind of
actually
mirrors
glass.
yeah, like the kind of mirrors I use, like I go to antique shops and pick up a mirror because that's actually melted crystal, you know. So
Right.
that's the biggest difference in what is the quality of, and I guess that would also go into like what you're doing with your dark sorcery, like quality. You can't use crayons on notebook paper for a freaking evocation and expect a positive result. You
Wait.
just can't. You can't do it. These are hi chicken. These are very sacred things, so they should be treated with the utmost respect. I mean, I know personally, I've waited like 6 months just saving money and acquiring tools that you need in order to properly do the ritual. Like, it's not, if you're not going to do it right, just don't do it at all because there, especially with neuromancy, there are consequences. There's consequences. Like, I mean, when I was attacked by that, it was like a spider geisha spirit
Mm.
through the abyss when I was traversing the abyss. It took me like 3 months, 3 or 4 months to shake her off me. Things were going haywire.
Oh
And I'm
my
talking
God.
about like stuff physically being thrown around in my room and in the house. And I mean, it can get very physical. There are consequences. It's not something that should be taken lightly. I also say, take a shower before you practice, whatever you're practicing. Groom yourself, put on nice clothes, smell good for the spirits. right?
Also, make
Like
sure that the items are cleansed too before you
or
you know.
cleanse, of course, yeah. Like you should have charged. I keep a couple containers of charged moon water, charged rose water. You cleanse it with that. You could use different perfumes you get at the botanicas. For sure. That's the stuff I use, and that's very important.
It's also good to draw symbols around the mirror too.
I disagree with that. Just my expertise, I think it's better to draw the symbol on a piece of parchment for the talismanic magic, because in drawing it on the mirror,
No,
you I
not on
believe
the mirror, but around the mirror,
yeah,
like on the frame.
but even then still, I've tried that method and I disagree with that because it gives you less control because you're using somebody else's door instead of creating your own. So then it's harder to close.
Okay, I like that you disagree because we get a new perspective on things. Go ahead and explain more about
Yeah, so like in my experience, right? I've tried that, but I noticed that I was using that which has come before us. There's nothing new under the sun. So effectively and essentially, I was using somebody else's mirror. I was using somebody else's forged doorway. So because it does not belong to me fully, I am subject to their rules. But then when I create my own door,
that.
but
Okay.
even so, like, because these symbols are, you're dealing with, like I said, primordial forces, like that of the forces of light and perspective, of consciousness, right? So even if you're using symbols that you think that are you made up yourself, you're still using something that's not just purely a mirror. I like to use mirrors because they can be very, very dangerous. I've been pulled in before. It could get bad. Which brings, you should have yeah, like protection
You know what?
tetragrammaton and stuff. But yeah,
Tell us a bit about that. What happened when you were pulled in?
well, when I was pulled in, it was a Faustian working Mephistopheles. I was working with him, and yeah, he kind of pulled me in because he wanted to show me something, and I just didn't want to go. So when he was pulling me in, instead of breaking the mirror, what I did was I managed to stand firm and pull myself out. So as I'm pulling myself out of the mirror, what I immediately started to do was I had some whorehound, the herb whorehound, and I lit it because I had some kerosene on some paper on it already scribed on it, and I lit that on fire, and then the smoke, and then I was fine. But like I said, Miramancy can be very dangerous. It's not something I take lightly. It's also not necessarily like, even though I'm talking about it, if somebody wants to try it, that's fine, but I don't teach it easily either.
Yeah,
You're
and
dealing with darkness.
you had we were talking earlier. You had mentioned something about how this ties in with the tree of death or
Yeah, for
Da'ath.
sure.
You
Yeah,
explain that?
yeah, for sure. Because you're working with your shadow self, right?
Yeah.
So as I've explained before, we shouldn't have rudimentary concepts of the Kabbalah. What we should have is an understanding that it's 10th or 12th dimensional. So on each sphere, it has this negative aspect, but they share the same space. So essentially, you are in the tree of life since you matter, right? But you're dealing with the aspects of your consciousness and being that do not matter, right? So that being said, um, you are dealing with things like the tree of dots, of death, right?
Right.
So you are dealing with darker sides of things. Because the question is, what does a mirror see in the dark? What does a mirror see in the dark? Exactly. What's there? So by you bringing light into the equation, you're just disrupting its natural state of being. So
Okay.
realize that this is a tool forged in darkness, made for darkness and of darkness.
Now, what deities would you say are good for working with a mirror that you
Straight up
often work with?
Chiron,
Okay.
right off the bat, Chiron, the ferryman. I would say any of the Papa Legba, any of the gatekeepers, the openers, you know, another really good one. Let me think. Payman or Paimon. Payman is excellent. Excellent with mirrors. Now you can get into your rough call workings with mirrors, but I mean, tread lightly, my friend. Um, but a
Okay, well
lot of
now
the
the reason
time,
you say that, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the reason you say that, why would you say use extra caution when working with him?
because children are not ready. No, rough call is if God had a father, he would be God's father's father. It is said that he's literally older than God from a time before times. He looks like Mr. Burns and is quite terrifying. He's not subject to any rules. He's not subject to, he just kind of does what he wants, and he doesn't like you. And there's nothing you can give him to make him like you. He will either tolerate you or he won't. But either way, if you call upon him, he will answer.
Okay, now what have been, let's say, an experience or two that you could mention when working with Papa Legba in the mirror?
Papa Legba, yes, yes, Nas. This is really good. It's best to meet him at a crossroads. When you get there, you throw four pennies, north, south, east, west. Bring him a beer. Now, before doing any of the Vodon workings, you have to speak to any of the Loa. You must first go through Papa Legba, for he opens the doors for you. I've had nothing but positive experiences, but working with Legba.
All right, and you had
But
mentioned that.
other entities for the mirror as well. I mainly use it when I'm doing straight up primordial stuff. Like if I'm summoning typhus,
Okay,
if I want to channel or gather energy with the Leviathan,
okay,
things like that of that nature. That's what I use that for. If I want to speak to a Titan like Gaia, or I want to speak to Prometheus, this is the kind of things I would use a mirror for.
okay. Now we had been talking a little bit on uh, alchemy before
Yeah.
we started doing this video. So explain a little bit about mirror magic and alchemy.
Well, the alchemist mirror is really important, you see, because you have to know where you stand. Like every man is made of a substance, but what is the substance you're made of? So, in order to see where you need to refine yourself, you have to first take proper and astute inventory of self, right? Like if you are made of copper or silver, in my case, it's a very lackluster silver. It needs can move forward. So once you take it, and it's also it gets into the point like also in the parable of the peacock's tail of the alchemist, like essentially a man gets into a place of his life where, and especially this has rampant in the occult scene, everybody feels that they're superior because in some ways they are, because they are doing the harder things to question the harder things of life and existence. So then ego comes into play. And please remember, you're working with a mirror. So the alchemist mirror. Think about the first Harry Potter movie. Wasn't that a very tricky mirror? Didn't it play on everything that you love, everything that you are? But remember, this is what the mirror is going to show you: the desires of your soul, where you lack. So then see it as such, because if you're using the mirror in order to get these things, you're filtering it through the darkest, most, you know, inequite part of yourself.
Mm,
So are you actually cursing yourself instead of blessing yourself? Would be the first question. So this is why self-gnosis, it's always the first thing you have to do to know thyself in order to do thy will.
right,
That is the
right.
most important part. Because especially things like chimeromancy, it's an illusionary magic. It's based in illusion.
Right.
So seriously, like, do you think, I mean, everybody has parts of themselves that hate themselves. I know I have parts of my being that hates myself. Everybody has issues with self-esteem, depression. Are you feeding this part of the beast within you? That's the question.
Hmm. Okay, so this is a good way of doing shadow work, as you were
Yeah,
explaining.
that's exactly what it is. It's shadow work. And this is what also gets into shadowmancy, because once you become more okay with your reflection with yourself, the thing is that you start using that more. Okay. The thing is that because like I said before, if you're aware of it, it's aware of you.
Mm,
So then, because if it's aware of you, this is where the shadowmancy gets into play. Like, are you aware of your shadow? Because once you start giving it energy, it starts giving you energy. A concept I could draw upon because I'm a huge geek is Naruto with the Jinchuriki. They have to give in order to take. So this is essentially what is a part of you, which also back again ties into the tree of deaths, which ties into the Kabbalah, which ties back into alchemy, because this
mm,
is a working of the Merkaba. When the Merkaba is the understanding of using the chakras that are outside of your body, fueling this vehicle of epic abracadabra. I speak, so therefore I create proportions. Every single person has this. So
mm.
once you charge up your Kundalini, it fills the it's kind of like the three-dimensional star of Deva of the chakras outside of your body, which allow you to travel and use mirrors more effectively. Because in an energetic and alchemical state, you're first taking this said solid with no aura within it, placing aura in it in order to then kind of make it like a liquid. So that you've just changed the alchemical state of it.
Okay.
So now the question is, and I don't even know the answer, does the mirror ever actually change back? Or have you just enchanted a magical mirror? Which brings me to my next point. Now that you have used this mirror once, and it possibly you don't really know, I mean, how could you gauge whether or not it's back to normal? So now the mirror is forever open. So now that part of your reflection, that part of your being is also aware of you and a part of this world. So when does the interaction stop? That's the point that I'm making. This is why this is a very dangerous art, because it doesn't stop. So are you in control of it, or is it in control of you? How many practitioners, Alfredo, I have a question for you this time. How many practitioners have you seen destroy themselves seemingly while they begin a certain working?
I've seen a handful, honestly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. They
But
start doing things that you're just like, why, dude, just stop, you know? And they just can't.
I think that's when they are not in control of them anymore. Eventually, they feel a
Mhm.
pull, and if it's unfortunate.
And what's more alluring than one's own reflection? How
No,
often do people look in the mirror every day, take pictures of themselves every day?
a lot more than they like to admit it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because one of and I'm just going to give just a snippet of one of the tools that I use to begin this said evocation or summoning connection process. The way I start is I look in the mirror, and when I'm looking in the mirror, I look for my reflection, and then I become my reflection. I stand still enough so that I can perceive it as fully me. And then I switch perspectives, I switch eyes. So now I have the eyes of that in the mirror, and the mirror has the eyes of me. Now, if you believe in parallel dimensions and things like this can also be a way. This is why I brought up the Merkaba, a way of actually shifting through the paradigms. I
Mm,
do use it as such sometimes, as a vehicle.
okay. Very well said. Now, is there anything that you're working on right now that we can expect from you in the near future?
Yeah, yeah. I am currently working on a book that's actually about shadowmancy and mirrormancy,
Okay.
and that's I'm gonna take my time with it. I'm doing a lot of research, and yeah, so you could expect that in the near future.
Okay.
I
Well,
yeah, I'd
we
give it
will
like
have
three or
you.
4 months and I'll be ready.
Okay, cool. We'll have you back on when you complete that, and we'll talk about it.
Wonderful,
Um,
wonderful. Yeah,
yeah. So it's been good having you on. Good
thank you.
discussion. Everybody who's watching, make sure you check out Adam's Facebook Gowisha group.
Yeah,
Um,
and also my website's currently being built. It should be done soon. Just my programmer had to have surgery, so
okay.
just a little bit delays. But I'll have a website up and running soon, so I'll
Okay,
submit that.
cool. We'll be looking out for the website. We'll be looking out for the book.
Thank
And everybody hit the link below this video and go ahead and join his group. It's a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of good discussions.
you. Thank you for
Adam,
having me.
thank you again for coming on. And everybody watching, like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.